So today I'm going to talk about any strategies to reduce SO2 or to replace SO2 for microbial and oxidation management. I'm going to focus on winemaking and from grapes to the end of fermentation because it's a large subject and I only have 30 to 40 minutes and the rest for the use of SO2 after fermentation, it will be another webinar, and we also have already some webinars online that are treating this subject. If you have any questions, feel free to type your questions on the chat, and I will spend some time to answer all your questions by the end of this presentation. So first of all, as a little introduction, I wanted to gather some information on why SO2 is becoming a subject and what are the different trends in the consumer side about the SO2 concerns, I would say. So first of all, in general, people consume less but better, and the general tendency is that the consumers are more and more educated. They want more info about what they are consuming, which is totally normal in terms of food or any beverages. They have a growing interest in minimal intervention wines, organic, biodynamic, lower or no added SO2, less additives. They want more transparency and sustainability. So it's already happening in Europe where the producers have to add on the list of ingredients on their bottle of wine usually through a QR code. So they need and are looking for more transparency, clearer labeling, more simple ingredient lists. But it's not only for wine; it's for a lot of different products. Certifications work more, let's say, organic, any eco-friendly practices do influence the buying decisions for the newer generation. Also, SO2 becomes a concern in terms of health and wellness issues, health and wellness focus. People associate sulfites to something not healthy, something that can impact their health. Sometimes it can be related to headaches, even though we know that it's not this type of molecule that provokes headaches, but sulfite is a big allergen. They are also focusing on lower alcohol wines. We see more trends with low or no alcohol, lower or no sugars, more clean wines. And then, as I said, people are looking for drinking less but better with a focus on more aromatic complexity, freshness, and also they want to learn the story behind the bottles, more winemaker stories, for example. And there is also another interest in different formats and different types of wine. So canning becomes a new market. Smaller formats, smaller than the 75 centiliter. We observed also an increase in terms of sparkling wine demand and rosé. So this kind of formats and type of wine demand really a strict SO2 control as well as different oxygen management for quality products. So on the side of production now. We know that the climate is evolving. Every season is different. In the past 50 years, we've observed a huge shift in terms of winemaking, wine seasons in a lot of different places in the world. So if we focus on California, this is a projection of the shift of temperature in the next 100 years, 75 years. So this is a projection. So here in blue, that's the projection if we are anticipating a lower temperature rise, and in red if it's actually the higher emissions. So if we're projecting higher temperature, we can see that in 2100 we would have an increase from 2 degrees Fahrenheit to 12 degrees Fahrenheit in California. So that's a big shift in correlation with the different winter precipitation, so the amount of rain. So we can see that globally, the precipitation will or increase in some areas or highly decrease. So that's the amount of water that is projected in the next 50 years. So what does it mean is that with a temperature increasing from 2 to 12 degrees in even in 25 years, it might increase by 2 degrees Fahrenheit to 4 degrees Fahrenheit. We will have the temperature increase, but the same amount of rain, same amount of water. So it means that it will increase the hydric stress and also impacts the maturation. The maturation will be impacted, for example, having phenolic maturity before the rest. So, for example, we can have a shift in phenolic maturity in grapes. So the grapes will ripen at a different stage. So the sugar ripeness will be also achieved earlier, for example. So it can lead to a different balance between alcohol structure and freshness. This is already what we observed in some areas or in some vintages where the phenolics are not ripe, but the sugar level is already pretty high. So higher sugar means more alcohol, and so increased alcohol reduces in general SO2 effectiveness. So the SO2 is less effective in high alcohol wine. So this is why we need to rethink our wine stabilization. We'll have more phenolic compounds leading to more bitterness and astringency. These phenolic compounds can risk more early oxidation. Then the SO2 can combine a lot if there is too much phenolic compounds, for example. So the traditional SO2 addition at pressing might not be sufficient. In terms of early ripening, higher temperature during the growing season and during the harvest, we might observe faster malic degradation, so pH increase and total acidity falling. And this kind of lower acidity and higher pH basically weakens the microbial stability. There is more better conditions for spoilage microorganisms to develop. And then in general, the pH, the pH really impacts the efficiency of SO2. So this kind of maturity evolution can potentially create more unstable and unbalanced wines with heavier aromas, so higher alcohol, lower aromas, lower acidity, and heavier mouthfeel and aromas, for example. So the wines are also tend to be more sensitive to oxidation and to microbial spoilage in this kind of conditions, and this is why SO2 is no longer enough in some situation. So just a few based on SO2. So SO2, we can find three forms in wine. So we have the molecular SO2. That is the free SO2 we find in the wine. So it's mainly antimicrobial. It inhibits yeast and bacteria. And then we have the H3 HSO3 minus. It's hard to say. That's the bisulfite ions, which is more antioxidant that will avoid oxidation or neutralize oxidative compounds. And then part of this total SO2, we can have also a big part of the combined SO2. In this situation, the combined SO2 doesn't have any effect on oxidation or microorganisms because it's combined to other compounds like sugars, acids, acetaldehydes, or phenolic compounds. So SO2 is not always a solution because first, it can be an advantage. So SO2 is a solvent. It does extract, but sometimes it extracts the compounds we don't necessarily want. Sometimes it can be just too much tannins, bitter tannins, or it can also inactivate thiamine, which is going to be useful for the fermentation. It does impact the microorganisms, so it can create some stress for the yeast or for the bacteria. It can increase the lag phase, for example, if you want to start a fermentation with a Saccharomyces. SO2 can favor the synthesis of H2S by the yeast or other sulfur compounds of aromas. Adding sulfites on grapes or on must can create a microbial vacuum for a certain time. Then it destroys the natural balance, but then some other microorganisms can come back and then be in major population and impact the wine. It does bleach the color for lower phenolic red varieties, for example, or other type of wine. It can impact the color, and in general, it can close the wine. Usually, if you compare a wine with low or no SO2 to a wine with a high dose of SO2, usually the aromas are more muted. The wine is less expressive, less fruity. And of course, the SO2 is not always effective regarding the pH of your wine. For example, here on this graph, we see that regarding to the pH of your wine, the total of free SO2 you have to add is increasing crazily. So if you want to achieve 0.8 milligram per liter of molecular SO2, which is the antimicrobial dose, you'll see that you will need to add way too much SO2 to your wines, and it's not sustainable. It's not a good amount because it can be very impactful. So right now, what are our alternatives to SO2? So the SO2 is amazing because it has it's antioxidant. It's antioxidazic, meaning that it can stop the enzymatic reaction of oxidation. It is antimicrobial, and it does extract. So first of all, to avoid using too much SO2 or any other alternatives, the sorting of grapes becomes very important. Make sure you're working with healthy grapes that you can sort, or you have a good hygiene in your cellar. So sanitation and hygiene is becoming very important, especially if you do no SO2 winemaking or low SO2 winemaking. You need to manage your cellar sanitation very good, and have and start always with the best quality of grape as you can. And then to replace SO2, we have a few alternatives. So to use high antioxidant product, you can use tannins. Tannins are very reactive to oxidation. Usually that's gallic tannins or grape tannins. They can really, and elagitannins, they can really protect your wines against oxidation. Sulfur compounds, peptides can also be helpful to lower the product's potential and protect your wine against oxidation. Ascorbic acid is also a solution. To stop the oxidation enzymatic reaction, such as the PPO or lacase activity, using sacrificial tannins is a good solution. Fining agents too. So by using a fining, you just remove any components that can be easily oxidized or that are oxidizing your wine or your juice. For antimicrobial activity, there are solutions like bioprotection, chitosan. You can use on juice to kill some microorganisms. Lysozyme is also a solution. And for extraction, maceration enzymes like some different solutions like enzyme crush, enzyme clear can be a solution to extract more components you want, and avoiding the use of SO2. So let's talk right now about antimicrobial activity, because this is very important, especially from the beginning of the winemaking process. So what do we have in the wine? So there are a lot of different families of microorganisms, from fungus to yeasts to bacteria. So you can find some Botrytis cinerea, which is a fungus, Acetobacter, Gluconobacter, which is acetic bacteria. A lot of different non-Saccharomyces yeasts, such as Decara, such as Ansenia spora uvarum, etc. You can find Brett, which is also yeast, Saccharomyces, and lactic acid bacteria. So that's a lot of different microorganisms, but it's like in every medium, in food science, in the nature, on animals, on us, it's pretty natural. There is a natural balance of different microorganisms, but some of them can be more impactful for the wine than others. They have different growth promoters, such as sugar, nitrogen, some vitamins, other minerals, different acids. The temperature can definitely help those microorganisms to develop. Oxygen can be also a growth factor for some of the different microorganisms. And then if we don't control them, or if they are not in the right equilibrium, or balance, then there are some consequences, such as acetic acid production on must, or during the fermentation, or even after the fermentation, if there is too much acetic bacteria, or if the yeast is under stress, or there is a lot of different factors. Ethyl acetate, acetaldehyde production can be a consequence of having too many spoiling microorganisms, nutrition depletion that can lead to stock fermentation, for example, toxin production like biogenic amines, any other further contamination, molecule binding SO2, so no-SO₂ efficiency, and break taint, lactic taint, etc. So here we wanted to observe the population of microorganisms on must. So we did the analysis of 5 different terroirs, 5 different areas on 5 different grape varieties. So you see that we did the cell counting on must just after pressing of different grape varieties. So we have Chenin, Merlot, Pinot Noir, Tannat, and Cabernet Sauvignon. And you see that the population of non-Saccharomyces yeast is huge. Same as the compared to the total yeast. So mainly we can find on grapes and on must a lot of non-Saccharomyces yeast, and Enseniaspera uvarum is the main non-Saccharomyces yeast you see on the must. So we can see that we have from 10 to the 5th of colony forming units per milliliters of wine. And in general, a healthy and ripe grape has from 10 to from 10 to the 4th to 10 to the 6th colony forming units per gram. So this is totally normal. But then if we don't control this, then this non-Saccharomyces can develop and create some different issues for you during the fermentation. So then one of the different solutions we have, and I want to talk to you about, is bioprotection. So bioprotection is a natural alternative to SO2 for microbial control. So instead of adding SO2 and killing any microorganisms, sometimes it's not even working. Sometimes just the addition of SO2 you're adding to your grapes is directly consumed or combined. But here, the idea is to select a non-Saccharomyces yeast, add it to your grapes, and then it's going to develop and take over the medium and will help to limit the spoilage of different other microorganisms and create a safer environment for fermentation. So it helps to control the population of microbes. It inhibits the spoilage microbes because it's going to develop, colonize, and take the space from other different microbes. There is no microbial vacuum. It's actually filled by the bioprotection. And it's safe conditions for the Saccharomyces cerevisiae, because what we want is to ferment this must and to create a good wine. So what do we need for the best condition of bioprotection? So it needs to inhibit all the spoilage microorganisms. So not only non-Saccharomyces yeast, but also bacteria. It shouldn't inhibit the Saccharomyces. We're not selecting a bioprotection for its ability to ferment. Usually we want it to not ferment, because if we want to add a Saccharomyces, or if we want to do spontaneous fermentation, we want the cerevisiae to do the job. It needs to be fast, because we don't have a lot of time. For example, if you're making red and you don't want to do a cold soak, it needs to create a safe environment quickly. It needs to be resistant to extreme conditions, rather if you do cold soak or if you do high temperature for the start of the fermentation, for example. And it shouldn't have any impact on wines. So no off aromas, but also no pretty neutral for your winemaking. So this is how we found that the strain called Metschnikowia pulcherrima is a very good candidate for this. So the Metschnikowia pulcherrima is a non-Saccharomyces yeast. It's really known in food industry and food science for its ability to prevent from other spoiling activity. We can see this strain on a lot of in the nature on a lot of different fruit or grapes. So it's naturally found on grapes in the wine industry. We just studied it more precisely, and we selected one of the strains that had the best ability for bioprotection in wine. So Metschnikowia pulcherrima is called like this because it creates pulcherrimic acid. So what it does? So Metschnikowia pulcherrima is an antimicrobial non-Saccharomyces yeast because it inhibits the growth of other population. What it does, it's monopolizing the iron resource, and the iron resource is something that the other yeast, the other non-Saccharomyces yeast needs to develop. So by just monopolizing the iron from other population, there is a mechanism of deprivation, and then the other population are just dying because they don't have what they need to multiply. So as you see, when we do a counting of cells, it's really easy to observe the Metschnikowia pulcherrima because it creates a red coloration due to the acid pulcherrimic. And it creates an inhibition halo. So this prevents the spoilage growth and just kill the rest of the microorganisms. You can see on the different pictures. So that's the mechanism of the bioprotection of this Metschnikowia pulcherrima to actually kill and avoid the development of other microorganisms, but the Saccharomyces. And also it has amazing aptitude to develop and multiply. So I wanted to show you this trial. So it's one of the different trials we've made. So this was on a chenin. The chenin, unfortunately, was not in a very good shape. You can see that there is some botrytis, and the harvest is very heterogeneous. So we wanted to compare two treatments. One first SO2 treatment, a classic treatment of 50 ppm of SO2 on grapes versus 50 gram per tons added on grapes, where we just add bioprotection, where we add our Binature, which is our Metschnikowia pulcherrima. So we did a side-by-side pressing, side-by-side cold settling, different inoculation and fermentation. And after fermentation, we did some analysis. We wanted to compare the quality of the wine, the different aromas, and if the bioprotection worked or not. So what we observed first is that we had way more aromas on the bioprotection wine compared to the SO2. So adding no SO2 to the wine resulted in having less stress for the yeast. So the yeast had better fermentation conditions and better conditions to release more volatile soils during the fermentation. So you can see that the wine contains more CRMH, HCRMH, so more aromas compared to the SO2, because the SO2 creates stress for the yeast, and maybe they were more oxidation. And then in terms of fermentation conditions, we can see that the SO2 impacted the fermentation, and then some sulfur compounds of flavors were produced, were created. So we can see that there is more dimethyl sulfur and diethyl sulfur production, leading to more H2S compounds production, more off flavors, aromas, so the wine will be less clean on the palate because of yeast stress due to SO2 content, compared to the no SO2 wine with just bioprotection. So this is very interesting data to show that SO2 is not always a solution to create clean aromatic wines, and there are good, efficient alternative to first control the microorganisms and to create more aromatic, cleaner wines. So in terms of tasting, we had a tasting panel, blind tasting, of course, where the bio-nature wine were perceived as more crispy, more balanced. People preferred the bio-nature Chenin Blanc with more different aromas compared to the control, that where they perceived some more faults. And then we also did the same experimentation on Cabernet Sauvignon. We had same results where the bio-nature wine was perceived as more balanced, better aromatic perception, more roundness, cleanliness. It's also very important, and global complexity compared to the SO2 wine, where 50 ppm were added on the grapes. So just a few words on Binature. So Binature is our pure Metschnikowia pulcherrima strain. It has a strong dominance and fast implementation on grapes or in the must. We selected just this specific Metschnikowia pulcherrima because it has no fermentation capacities, so it's safe to use it for cold soak or pre-fermentation maceration. So no CO2 production, so you can easily settle your must before racking off. It does have a high oxygen consumption, meaning that you can also avoid any oxidation of your must or your grapes. Let's say if you do grape transportation and then you add the bioprotection during transportation, then in the first juice there is first less microorganisms or no spoiling microorganisms, and then less oxidation. It doesn't inhibit Saccharomyces cerevisiae, meaning that if you want to start spontaneous fermentation, the fermentation will go better because there is no competition with other microorganisms and no food competition. And also, if you inoculate with your Saccharomyces, then the Saccharomyces will have a shorter lag phase and will start the fermentation quickly in the best conditions. It does resist to more extreme conditions, so from 35 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. You can also use SO2 with it, so you can use the Binature in combination with SO2 if you want. It is resistant to up to 60 ppm of total SO2. And in terms of pH, its metabolism will be fully activated from a pH of 3. And it's very easy to use. So it makes it a very good alternative to SO2 if you want to replace SO2, for example, if you add SO2 on grapes, or if you are used to add SO2 at the juice pan or during crushing. So that can be used at those different stages. So how to use it? Because it needs to be practical. So you can use it directly on grapes. So you can just dilute it in water and spray it on your beans, for example, on your grapes. But the easiest is to sprinkle it directly. So dried yeast directly, you sprinkle them on grapes. So usually the dose is 50 grams per ton. So you just use a tube and then you sprinkle it. You can also sprinkle the product in the juice pan, just dried. It's gonna rehydrate directly in the juice. And then it needs to be easy for you to add it. So you can just add it during picking. So you just add in the layers of grapes, or before transportation. You can just add it on the top of the grapes, and then it's gonna rehydrate and develop during the transportation. I think the easier for any operator is to add it when you receive the grapes, or just before processing. You just can sprinkle that on top of the grapes, or doing cold soak after destemming. So there is anytime is the best time, but the earlier the better, of course. And then also you can also use it on equipment. So you can spray the Binature on equipment after sedimentation to create a biofilm. So for example, if during the day it's getting very hot while processing your grapes, then you can spray the Binature on the crusher, for example, or on the rollers of your destemmer, or in some places where usually you can smell vinegar, or you know that it's more subject to have a higher population of microorganisms. So we talked about an alternative to SO2 to avoid any microbial impact on grapes and must. Of course, ketosane can be also a solution, but ketosane is like SO2, so it just impact the population of microorganisms. It's not always, it can be very efficient, but it can also impact the fermentation. So you have to be careful using this kind of product. Our product, Kilbret, can be used, but sometimes it can impact the start of the fermentation. So a racking can be beneficial, or so you can just remove the product before starting the fermentation. I'm happy to discuss it more with you if you send me an email, for example. Now, let's talk about oxidation. So oxidation is a major concern when we're talking about grape processing and must. Oxygen plays a very big role in winemaking and wine quality. It can be detrimental for the wine. So it's important to understand the different oxidation reaction and how to control it. And we do have different alternatives and solutions to not use SO2, but to keep protecting your grapes and your must from any oxidation and oxygen. So first of all is the use of tannins. So in this case, I'm going to talk about sacrificial tannins. So I call them sacrificial because they are tannins that can highly react with proteins to avoid any enzymatic reactions and to protect the natural tannins of your grapes. So you can use protannin R on red grapes and tannin gallical alcohol more on whites and rosé. But they have the same impact. They are anthocyanidec tannins. They have a high affinity with proteins, so they react with proteins and enzymes. Well, enzymes are proteins, so they react with lactase activity, so they stop it. So that's from botrytis. Same with PPO activity. So if you have any damaged grapes, botrytis or mold or any damage on your grapes, using this type of tannins will stop the oxidation reaction. It does improve the clarification, and they inhibit oxygen radicals. It does scavenge radicals, oxygen radicals. So it's basically protecting your grapes from any oxidation. So that's also products that you can sprinkle dry on your grapes from 180 to 250 grams per ton regarding the health of your grapes. It does also stabilize the color because it avoids any oxidation and start to stabilize early in the process the anthocyanins. So what we see here is the impact of different dose of protannin R on a red wine. It was on a Cabernet. So you can see that compared to the control, we have a way more intense color and with less oxidation. And then on this graph, we can also compare the use of protannin R to not using protannin R on the color intensity on the left and the total polyphenols. So that's the green dot. So we can see that the color intensity is way higher compared to the control, and same for the content of tannins, because all the natural grape tannins are preserved thanks to the presence of these tannins. So this can be used instead of using the SO2, because that will react to consume any dissolved oxygen and stop any oxidation activity. So that's to apply directly on grapes, white or red grapes. Then, how to avoid and reduce precursors of oxidation. So on white and rosé, if you are pressing, the grape reception management is very important. You need to limit transfer, mushing, basically, because this is when your grapes are starting to be oxidized. In terms of press cycle, there are different techniques or different press that can avoid the production of more oxidation and the creation of the extraction of more phenolic compounds. You can start to clarify the juice early by using an enzyme, like a clarification enzyme. It works fast and it will help to really remove any phenolic compounds or any molecules that are easily oxidable or that can be oxidized on the must. You can also use fining. So basically, after pressing, you can use fining agents on the juice pan or in your tank to help to settle your juice and remove any quinones, phenolic compounds, any molecule that could impact your wines and that can oxidize your juice. So we have pea protein, fining agents containing PVPP. PVPP is also very good to treat oxidation, but pea protein too, casein mix, etc. Here we have a graph showing that using a fining agent not only protect your grapes and juice from oxidation, but also preserve the aromas, because being able to use a fining agent will remove any molecules that could then oxidize the aromas. So here we have the 4-MMP, 3-MH, A3-MH, which are the main siols, and the amount of esters. And we can see that compared to the control, the use of fining agent help the wine to release more aromas, and the wine is then more aromatic compared to not using fining on juice. We can see also here on the color, so it was just a fining on free-run juice. We can see that the control is way more yellow, so more oxidized compounds, more quinones compared to the green fine must. So it was 50 grams per hectoliters added on the must, and you can see that the must is way more clearer, less yellow, so there is less oxidation, and then you can start the fermentation on a cleaner juice that is not containing precursors of oxidation, phenolic compounds, or anything that could impact afterward the aromas. Same for a Grenache, where we compared the control to green fine must, which is our pure pea protein, to green fine express, which is a mix between PVPP and pea protein. So using a fining agent is another strategy to replace SO2. So we can replace SO2 by adding some sacrificial tannins that will react like the SO2 to oxygen and protect the grapes against any oxidation, and then adding an enzyme or a fining will help to clarify and remove any compounds that can then oxidize the wine and impact the wine for long term. Then, last but not least, I wanted to present you a new project we started a few years ago. It was in collaboration with University of Bordeaux, the Institute of Wine and Vine, and the Center of Rosé in Provence. So we wanted to focus on a yeast that would not produce SO2 or that would actually consume SO2. So that was a long project to find and select this specific yeast. So in general, Saccharomyces cerevisiae produce from 10 to 30 milligrams per liter of SO2 during fermentation. That can be a lot because then it can bound to other molecules, and then your total SO2 by the end of the fermentation or by the end at bottling can be very high. Some high producing strains or in specific conditions such as stress conditions, it can produce up to 60 milligrams per liter of SO2, which is pretty high. So what we wanted to do is to select a very good fermenter, a very good yeast that would not produce or would actually reduce the SO2 content in wines, and has very interesting profile. So here is a trial where we compared two different strains and the addition or not of sulfur. So for example, on the strain A, we fermented without sulfur, and then we fermented with 20 ppm of SO2 added on the must. And then we did the same thing with the Excellence Rosé and the same thing with the strain B. So we can see that some strain will not produce SO2, but some other strain will produce some, like the strain B. It produced 25 ppm of SO2 in a no SO2 medium, and it produced even more in presence of SO2. And then what we observed is that the Excellence Rosé did consume all the SO2 that was on the must, the 20 ppm of SO2, and is not producing any ethanol or very low production of acetaldehyde compared to other yeasts during fermentation. So we did other trials. This trial was on a Syrah Rosé. We had 3 different tanks, same must. So we added 50 ppm of SO2 on must, and then we wanted to see the difference after fermentation between the 3 different tanks, the 3 different strains. So after the fermentation, we calculate the VA production, the final SO2, and the TL35. So we can see that the strain B created way more VA than the others. So the other yeast, and especially the Excellence Rosé, didn't produce VA, or a very, very low amount. In terms of final total SO2, the Excellence Rosé consumed a little bit around 25 ppm of the SO2. So it has a strong SO2 consumption compared to the other one. And then the TL35 is a very interesting analysis we do. So TL35 is the amount of total SO2 we need to add in order to reach 35 ppm of free SO2. So what we observe is that the combining power of the SO2. So that means that the strain A and B, for example, we need to add more SO2 to reach 35 ppm of free SO2, compared to the Excellence Rosé, where there is less combining molecules in the wine, in the must, and the SO2 you will add will be more efficient. Then we wanted to compare the aromatic impact of this yeast. So the Excellence Rosé, compared to other high sialic strains, those produce some A3H, so more some citrus, boxwood aromas, but also for some MSP and A3H, so exotic aromas, more, this type of styles. But also what we observed is that it does produce more BMT. So BMT is a type of style that smell and taste like flinty gunpowder. So it does produce more of this characteristic style. So a little bit more mineral. Some people could say, minerality, some whetstone aromas like this. And in terms of esters, this is a very fruity and floral yeast. So pretty well balanced between sales and esters, because it produced some aromas like strawberries, pineapple, but also stone fruit compared to the other ones. So pretty well balanced in the two. So then we wanted to compare it through a panel, a blind tasting panel, and we see that the Excellence Rosé has more aromatic intensity, less bitterness, And in terms of acidity and tension, it's higher too, because it's not written here, but the Excellence Rosé does preserve more malic acid. So there is more malic acid preserved after the end of the fermentation. So the wines are a little bit more crispy. There is more tension, acidity, and aromas complexity. So that was a few words to show you that we are working on this kind of subjects where we want to reduce the SO2 on our wines, and using this type of yeast can be helpful. Let's say you still want to add some SO2 on grapes, or you don't want to have any zero SO2 produced during the fermentation, then the Excellence Rosé can be a good candidate. So you can use it also on white wines. For example, if you make base wine for sparkling wine, you can have a total SO2 of 0 from the end of the fermentation. It has very good fruity profile. I know that we did a lot of trials in Italy for Prosecco production, and that works very well for organic winemaking too, if you want to be able to lower your total SO2. And in terms of aromatic, it's way more cleaner because there is less combining compounds production, so no sulfur products.